Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 33. We have some interludes, and we get into part 3 of Words of Radiance. We are well into Words of Radiance now, gentlemen. How are we feeling? We'll start with you, Eliot.
I will say, I was just thinking about this the other day. Actually, Words of Radiance so far. I mean, we're like a third of the way through the book, something like that. I think it's exceeded my expectations so far. We talked earlier on that I was lowering my expectations a smidge for Words of Radiance coming out. So far, it's meeting, if not exceeding those. So I'm feeling really good.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear. I will say, but before I jump to you, Paul, that I don't rate Words of Radiance as highly as some of the other books, and I don't get me wrong, I do really enjoy Words of Radiance. I just think there's better ones in the series, but a lot of people disagree with me. A lot of people really enjoy Words of Radiance, so I'm really happy that you're enjoying as much as you are. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing great. I've been really enjoying this. I think we are getting close to actually halfway through the book. At this point, not too far from it, at least. Um, I have enjoyed it a lot. My expectations were really high, but it's definitely lived up to or more. I feel like we've gotten a lot of significant events that we've kind of been waiting on for a long time happen already.
Sure.
Not even halfway through, so I've been really happy with it.
All right. We just came off of a high of some Zeth, Kaladin, Dalinar, Adolin, Shallan, all sorts of action, and we've got some interludes for this week. Do you guys have 2 words to describe these interludes? Let's start with Eliot.
My 2 words for the set of and the one extra chapter were different and engineer.
Different and engineer. I think I know what both of those mean. Paul, what are yours?
So my 2 words were impassioned and imminent.
Ooh, I do like those words. Impassioned, imminent, engineer. I'm blanking on your last one, Eliot.
Different.
Different. All right, let's discuss these. Let's start at engineer because I feel like that's the easy one. Eliot, what do your 2 words mean?
Yeah, definitely engineer. So I am an engineer, so I keyed into actually this chapter 35 where we get a little bit Adolin, and then specifically we get a little bit of Navani and kind of a little insight into her world. And I was geeking out. He actually does a fantastic job of kind of following an engineer's process through figuring something out and all of this. So it has probably no bearing on the entire story, but I was like, ha, that is how you solve an engineering problem. Spot on. So that was fun. And then different. I went for different or change, just because we have the interludes with the Parshendi Eshonai, who undergoes a pretty dramatic change and comes out very different in more ways than one, which I want to talk about. But then also we have the interlude with the Herald Town, and he seems changed or different or crazy, maybe not really sure there. And then you can even extend this to Adolin a little bit. Adolin, I think, is a little bit different of his showdown with Zeth. I think he's realized that he needs to maybe step up his game a little bit. So lots of people that have changed or are becoming, and Navani the engineer.
All right. There is a specific change that I'm sure you guys keyed into, but I'll ask about later. Paul, talk to me a little bit more about your 2 words.
Yeah, so first of the 2 being impassioned, that goes for a lot of the characters, but most notably Adolin.
Sure.
You can kind of see his emotion, a strong side of his emotion with kind of a disdain for what happened with Zeth and things like that, and kind of a big desire to improve and things like that. So that was the primary reason I chose impassioned. The next is imminent, not to be confused with eminent. I realized, well, looking into that those are two different words.
Okay.
Imminent referring to Eshonai and kind of an imminent threat. I would call it, as we see more of the Parshendi.
Okay. Interludes 5 and 8 are kind of tied together, so we can start there. I want to see if you guys key into this first before I talk about it. Someone want to pick up Interludes 5 and 8 and what they got out of it?
So I can start us off. So Eshonai, we get a couple more interludes from the perspective of Eshonai the Parshendi, which is fascinating. I really enjoyed a glimpse into their world, seeing the other side, if you will, learning about where they're going. We kind of left them with this kind of discover Stormform. We don't know if they're going to be successful. We find out here that they are successful, but maybe Stormform is not exactly what they thought it was. As Eshonai goes into the storm, something I kind of noted in Interlude 5 was just that she like tries to back out at the end of it. She like feels that something's wrong. She's like, no, this isn't what I thought it was. And she tries to like run away, but it's too late at that point. She kind of gets sucked in and brought into this storm form, which changes her. She comes out of the storm very, very differently in Interlude 8, for sure.
With Interlude 8, what is different about her?
So the part that it describes the physical difference that she has, which I thought was super super cool. It describes her. I think at one point, like she's got like this red lightning almost around her. That's like just this energy that she has. She can leap the chasm with like no effort, whereas before in their, I think it's in war form that they were in before, right? They're running charge and sometimes they don't even make it across the chasms. In storm form, she just kind of like flies basically right across the chasm. It's not even effort. And she talks about how she can command the wind, and the wind just does what she wants it to do. But the scariest change is at the very, very end. It's like the last sentence of Interlude 8. And basically the takeaway from it is it seems to me like the rational side of Eshonai, or the part that wanted peace, perhaps, that wanted to talk with Dalinar, is now trapped deep down inside and isn't getting a say anymore. It's just the like destructive Eshonai now, and not the peace talk Eshonai. So that scares me a lot.
Me as well. That was the main reason why I chose imminent as one of my words.
Yeah.
Because this storm form does not seem very fun for Alethkar in this war.
Right.
Especially after finally getting to the point where they would send a messenger and things like that. One thing that I thought was interesting with the first Interlude 5, so in the storm, in the high storm, she sees the Stormfather, similar to how Kaladin did when he was strung up. And I guess I thought that was interesting because although now we have seen the Parshendi more, and we've seen some from their perspective, I guess I kind of thought of them still as entirely different from humans, maybe even like below. I mean, that's kind of how they're treated
Right.
throughout the whole storyline. And I guess I, for whatever reason, didn't think that the Stormfather would appear, or they wouldn't be able to see the Stormfather or anything like that.
Sure.
I don't know why that is, but I thought it was kind of interesting that she does meet the Stormfather, and everything there. It was kind of interesting.
And he doesn't even talk hostility to her either. He talks to her and apologizes to her that, are you sure you really want this, about Stormform, that type of thing. It doesn't seem that the Stormfather is really on a side here, that he'll appear to Kaladin, but he'll also appear to Eshonai when she's out in the storm. So there's a bipartisan. Is that the correct word I'm looking for?
Something like that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. He doesn't seem to be necessarily taking sides, but I did notice that the Parshendi seem to have a rather strange relationship with him. It's like they respect him, but they hate him at the same time. Eshonai, he talks to her like that's a big moment for her. She wasn't expecting that to happen, but then I don't know. It seemed like they felt like he was still a bit of an enemy, and so it seems like there's a bit of a love-hate relationship almost going on there.
And then Eshonai turns into what they call Stormform, which again, Eliot, you described it as red lightning, superpower jumps, can control the wind. We don't really know what that means, but that's what she says. Her eyes are red. Where have we seen this description from? Anyone recognize this description?
Was it in one of Dalinar's visions? Or
yes, but that's not what I'm referring to.
Okay.
There's like red eyes under the water of a spren,
Mm-hmm.
but
okay,
yes, there is that, but that's not what I'm referring to.
Half point.
There have been mentions of red eyes before, but I couldn't place it. Like I couldn't remember what the significance there was.
So there's
I know I'm gonna like remember it. I want to say it was with one of the interludes, either one of the ones in the Way of Kings where I wanted to say it was with our other Aryan person. I don't forget the name.
Amian.
Yes, Amian person.
Mm-hmm.
Axes.
Yes, I wanted to say it was something with that, or one of those other characters in the interludes, but I don't remember.
What I'm trying to hint at here is Shallan's description in her head of Voidbringers. Red lightning on their skin, red eyes. Parallels here now. This
Definitely.
What Eshonai's become bigger, stronger, red on her skin, red on her eyes. This is a lot more accurate to the Alethi definition of a Voidbringer than the Parshendi or the Parshman either. If Shallan had shown up to the Shattered Plains and said, "Yo, the Parshendi, the Parshmen are Voidbringers," everyone would have been like, that's not what the Vorin texts say. The Vorin texts are way more monster-like than this. If they see Eshonai now, might be a little bit more believable.
Here's a monster, yeah, for sure.
And Eliot, you're right. I'm glad you keyed into that last sentence because there is a part of Eshonai's mind, the rational side of her, I think she describes it as, that is screaming at the at what's happening, and she thinks it's so wrong. So something has happened to Eshonai that was not planned and was not anticipated here.
And Eshonai was kind of the voice of reason, or the voice of peace, if you will, on the Parshendi Council that we saw. You know, I was encouraged when we learned before that Eshonai was going to be the one to go and try this Stormform first. I thought, oh, good. If anyone from the Parshendi that we've seen were to, you know, be granted that kind of power, it seems like she'd be the most responsible one and wield it, you know, towards not just destruction. Well, it seems like that piece of Eshonai is not getting a voice anymore. So that's why I'm terrified.
Yeah. The Alethi have confirmed a meeting with Eshonai, haven't they? There's one coming up, so that might change now. Any other thoughts from 5 and 8?
I knew the meeting had to be too good to be true.
Yeah.
I was really excited for that.
Push you on to 6.
Remind me how to say this guy's name again, because I cannot get it right in my head.
Take the H out and put an I in. Xyle.
Xyle. Okay, Xyle. I cannot get that one to stick. Every time I read the name in the book, I have to like pull up our old episode where we talk about it because I cannot
Although
remember it.
I will admit that Zale is kind of cooler, so we could just
I
call him
like that,
Zale.
but Xyle.
I think
Okay.
Xyle is cooler.
Zyle's fine. So we get an old grumpy Zyle interlude. So any thoughts on this chapter?
There was one thing that I thought was interesting. So I really liked this chapter. There's nothing groundbreaking, exciting necessarily, but we do kind of get the confirmation that Kaladin's going to get a little more instruction
Sure.
on fighting with a shard bear and things like that. But one thing I thought was interesting is it kind of shows Kaladin as like a dumb little kid almost, like. And I thought that was interesting because every way we've seen from Kaladin's perspective and even others around him, you know, he's very like responsible, you know, to the point man, you know, like nothing crazy out of the ordinary. And Zyle just talks to him like, and in that conversation, it sounds like Kaladin's like a 10-year-old, like
Please,
Recruit.
sir, will
thought
you
it was
show me
really
how to
funny. It
use
showed
a
him some-
sword?
Yeah.
Yeah. It showed him as like portrayed him as very childish, which was different.
I think
I
it's
gotta say, I'm
go ahead.
intrigued by this Xyle guy now. I actually really enjoyed this interlude. This might have been one of my favorites so far in Words of Radiance. One, because it gave us a bit of a different perspective there, and you get to see kind of how Xyle sees Kaladin as this like impudent little kid who's a little too cocky. But it a lot of other stuff. I feel like there's a few hints in here that make me really wonder about this guy. I mean, we already knew that he's different. He doesn't seem to fit in with the, even though he is one, he kind of gets to break some of the rules. He doesn't necessarily have to follow. He's kind of that old crotchety guy that no one's going to tell him that he's, breaking the rules and has that kind of authority over him, sort of thing. But then we get hints in here of like he seems to be aware of Syl. Like he mentions, or oh, it's that kid with the spren buzzing around. And he just kind of thinks it offhand, like, oh, the kid with the spren. It was like, well, hold on, pause, wait. Not a lot of people can see Syl. I mean, as far as we know, like Rock can see Syl for some strange reason, but beyond that, like hardly anyone, if maybe no one. So now we have someone else who's aware of Syl. That I think is bigger than it might seem at first. And then the is with some sort of reference to like voices in his head, where he's like waiting for the voice in his head to respond, but then he's like, oh yeah, that hasn't happened in years. Like, what is that a reference to? It did he like used to have a spren but he doesn't, or is it something completely different? Really, I was already intrigued about this guy. Now I'm more intrigued about this guy.
On my first read, I keyed into that as well, and I thought he had a spren and he was like becoming a Knights Radiant, and then his spren like died somehow or something like that. And
Yeah,
so that was my thoughts. So I'm glad you keyed into that.
he also he talks about like the role of an ardent in kind of this demeaning fashion, where he's like, oh yeah, these darn monks, they only get one blanket, off all night.
Right.
It's almost like this guy's not really an ardent. They've just kind of stuck him there because they don't have anywhere else to put him. It's almost like he's like way more of like a nobleman or some kind of who has this epic past life, and they want to keep him around because he's a fantastic swordsman. He can train people. They're like, we don't really have anywhere to put you, so you're gonna be an ardent, that kind of thing. Like that's the impression I'm getting of this guy, which makes him really interesting to me.
He has a comment about how these darn ardents don't even get locks on their doors. So
yeah, exactly.
So he doesn't get a lock. So has he not been an ardent in the past. Who knows?
Right.
I do like the persona that Sanderson gives Zyle here. We haven't had a grumpy old man yet, and we get when Kaladin comes knocking, or lack of knocking because he feels him coming and he opens the door, and Kaladin's like, "Yo, can you teach me how to fight shardbearers?" He's like, "No, go away." And then Kaladin,
Get off my lawn.
yeah, exactly. Kaladin says, "Please." He's like, "There are two people who sleep here. One is a grumpy person at nighttime, and one is a happy person in the daytime. So come back during the day."
Yep, it was great.
Any other thoughts from 6?
It's a good one. No other ones on 6, personally. It was pretty straightforward.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Exactly.
All right, Interlude 7. First of all, do you guys know who this is?
It's one of our heralds. It's the one we saw at the end of Way of Kings come out, right?
Correct.
Talinalilin.
Talon, Talonel, Talenalot, whatever you want to call him. What are our impressions of Talon?
Many names. So I was incredibly excited for this because I was like, whoa, we're going to learn more about our Herald guy, Herald homie. And he was kind of just, I don't know, he's wild. Everyone was just confused about him. They're like, who is this guy? Why does he have a shard blade and he has dark eyes, and why is it not disappearing? No one understood what was going on. And neither did I.
Good talk.
Yeah, this interlude is confusing because the guy's just like crazy madman rambling. It's like stream of consciousness. Like half the sentences aren't even sentences. It's almost hard to even follow what's happening.
Right.
I'm also still confused about the timeline here because I thought, okay, great. We've got this town guy. He's now interacting with like Elokar, and we're assuming it seems like maybe Dalinar and Adolin are the like conversers in the background here. I don't think they're even actually named, but I think I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know who's talking here, but the talk car. It might be Adolin, it might be Dalinar, it might be some of those folks. So I thought, okay, now we're gonna put this event of the Herald arriving into the time period. But it still doesn't answer that because yes, the Herald dude is now interacting with characters we know, but I would think if this had happened right here that we see here, by the time we hit the chapter 35 that we go to next, it would be something they'd be talking about in those, present day chapters. Oh, like we just found this random dark-eyed dude with a shard blade. This is big news. But they're not.
Right.
And so it seems like we may still be in the future at this point, that this may not have happened yet. I'm not 100% sure there, but I was trying to nail down a time, and I don't think we can yet.
The assuming, that's a big assumption, but assuming this happens after the end of the Way of Kings chapter where we see him, the epilogue of the Way of Kings, wouldn't the desolation have had to come, or whatever that means? Because when he shows up at Kolinar, he says, the desolation has come, I'm sorry,
here.
and then passes out. And now he's talking to Elokar and some other light eyes that we may or may not know. And where's the desolation?
Yeah, great questions. All the questions I'm asking.
I don't know.
We'll have to wait and find out.
I gotta say, one of the things that did make sense in this chapter, and I think I laughed out loud when I read it. I'll just go ahead and read you the quote. Don't try to understand wit, Borden. You'll only cause yourself pain. I thought that was fantastic. We get another reference to Wit, and the guy's like, yeah, Wit was just doing stuff. He was bashing himself in the head with a rock. I think he was making fun of me. And the other guy's like, yeah, don't even try and understand. You're just going to cause yourself pain. I agree with that, dude. That
Yeah.
I'm there.
We haven't heard from Wit yet, and we are in part 3 of Words of Radiance.
I gotta say, I thought he was gone for good, like left this world kind of thing. But sounds like maybe he's not quite gone yet, or he's still putzing around somewhere. So I bet he's too important to not come back at some point here.
Or maybe he's too important to be worried about the Shattered Plains. Maybe he's got other things to do.
Fair enough.
Any more thoughts on the interludes before we hop into part 3?
Nothing.
This is a general thought, not about the specifics, but we can kind of see that there's a pattern to the interludes in this book compared to the Way of Kings. Way of Kings, it was just always like 3, and they were all different characters from wherever. And this, it's like an Eshonai interlude, and then 2 others, and then another Eshonai. And these almost just feel like chapters. It doesn't feel that much like an interlude, especially the Eshonai ones. And then with Zyle, and the first one, I think we had one with another character that like was in our story.
These are way more relevant than the Way of Kings interludes are.
Yeah, it's like current times, like current place,
right?
Things. So
no Ishik.
And I'll be honest, I definitely liked the Way of Kings interlude style more.
Okay.
Which I don't know how long you can keep that going in the books, because at some point it has to be relevant information, I guess. But
right.
But I kind of liked the ambiguity of, how is Ishik ever going to get into this, But
The Way of Kings ones were kind of fun because you could, at least the way I read, perhaps maybe a little too analytically, I can kind of turn the analytics brain off going into a Way of Kings interlude and just be like, oh, this is going to be something completely irrelevant right now. It's just going to be a fun little story about Ishik paddling around the pure lake. No, these ones are way more like, important stuff's happening here in the, timeline that we're in. So I agree. They're not quite so exotic as they were in Way of Kings.
Right. Chapter 35.
Let's do it.
Starting part 3 of Words of Radiance. Adolin is throwing a fit because he has lost a fight for the first time in who knows how long, and he's not very happy about it. So he's throwing his shard blade against a rock over and over. Anyone want to pick this up?
I actually like from Adolin. It could maybe come off a little bit as throwing a fit, but I actually took it as more of a Adolin's a bit cocky sometimes. He's a little bit full of himself. I mean, to a bit of a flaw. I mean, that rubs Kaladin the wrong way, right? Kaladin really hates that Adolin's this cocky kid. But Adolin at least here recognizes when he's beat. He recognizes that, whoa, Zeth completely outclasses me. I need to fix that. And what is Adolin doing? He's off training. He's immediately off saying, okay, I need to get better. And so I think that's admirable for me in Adolin, for him to say, whoa, I've got a weakness here. Let's fix it. Let's get out there and work hard and get better so that I'm ready next time, which I think is smart. That's super smart for Adolin to at least try and get better for when Zeth eventually comes back.
I did like that, and I also liked we saw a good realistic element. So, for example, I feel like one of the I don't want to use the word dramatic, but for lack of a better term, gonna say one of our most dramatic characters is Kaladin. I feel
Mhm.
like anytime something goes wrong, he's like, I'm going to be the perfect soldier and I'm never going to let anything bad happen ever again kind of attitude.
Right.
And
Yep.
Adolin kind of has that here, but then he kind of stops himself and is like, I can't wear my shard plate all the time. Like,
Yep.
I have to
Right.
be kind of realistic with this. I'm really upset that this happened, but we're going to move forward and I can't be like crazy about it.
Sure.
So
Adolin's a little bit more realistic with his expectations than maybe Kaladin is. Because when I don't remember who died at the hands of Zeth at the end of part 2, but one of his bridgemen dies, and Kaladin says, "Oh, I failed him. I I got him out of the bridge crews just for him to die here." And Sill's like, "Wait a minute. No, no, you didn't. He died a free man. He died a soldier, and you're gonna take that from him? Like that's your responsibility? No, he died what he lived a better life than he would have without you. So why are you kicking yourself for this?" And Callan's like, maybe, okay, maybe you're right, but yes, Adolin might have more realistic expectations for himself.
I noted that Adolin again is getting more suspicious of Kaladin, his abilities, and he's still processing and thinking back like, oh man, the guy that did the best job of standing up to Zeth was that bridgeman guy, bridge boy, whatever he calls him, and
Mm-hmm.
he even thinks to himself he remembers like the sleeve that was cut on Kaladin's arm, and still trying to figure out like, oh, I thought the shard blade cut his arm off, but it's still there, or it's still alive. It's not a dead limb, so he must not have. But the sleeve was cut. Kaladin, Adolin is getting more and more evidence. Eventually, Adolin's going to figure this out. I I guess you could call that a prediction, but I think sooner or later, Adolin is going to arrive at the Kaladin has supernatural abilities because he's already seen like 2 or 3 different times now Kaladin do stuff he probably shouldn't be able to, and he hasn't put it together yet, but I think he's gonna.
Speaking of supernatural abilities, we see Soulcasters for the first time. So Adolin walks back into camp after training out on the Shattered Plains a little bit, and he sees a troop of Soulcasters, which that phrase is used for both the fabrial used to soulcast and the person that uses the soulcaster. Both are quote unquote soulcasters, and apparently they're kept secret, out of sight from people. Does anyone think this is weird?
Weird is the right word for it. I was not sure what to think of this little segment here. I was very curious to see because we haven't really seen much of soul casting beyond what and Shallan can do. So to see like the ardent version of soul casting was very interesting, and there's some interesting bits here. But yeah, it was weird. Some of this stuff was confusing.
maybe I didn't pick up on it as much as I should have. I've kind of assumed that every major place throughout Roshar kind of has this. Just thinking back to, I feel like it's always been alluded to, like with Shallan's story and the Soulcasters. I took it that every realm has their Soulcasters for whatever reason,
Right.
whether that be for like money, food, whatever. Because I thought, isn't that how they like make food
Mm-hmm.
and things? They get the gem hearts and things and use that to like create food
Yep.
and other things.
With
Isn't
the
that with the
notable
Soulcasters?
exception with the notable exception being Shinovar, right? Because we
Mhm.
had that one scene where they were like trading soulcast goods, and that was so like important to the Shinovar. But yeah, these guys are like really important for the thing of creating food, of getting rid of waste. This is kind of how they do everything, right?
Don't they create a building in this chapter? Or like a storm wall. They create like an awning or something.
It's like some kind of like windbreak struck allow someone to shelter under it during a high storm. I think was the what they were talking about. I think the weirdest part though was not even the soul casting itself though. It was the description of the soul casters, the people themselves. They're described as having these just different eyes and skin where they have these like sparkly eyes and this skin. It's like described as like stone almost. It's got wrinkles and it looks like stone, I think was what I had in my notes.
Yep.
It's very strange.
And
I
then
was not expecting that by any means. That I was not. I just envisioned as being the ardent scholarly types that have these on to have them like have physical changes because of because they're doing this that caught me by surprise.
yeah, we'll get more on it later, but there are rules to soul casting which have been alluded to but not revealed yet.
Interesting. And it leaves me with a question too of is thinking of Shalon and her soul casting. She obviously hasn't done much soul casting yet. She's only done it like 2 or 3 times, right? And so is her version of soul casting going to have the same effect on her? Like if she does, continues on to do this, is she going to become like these guys look here with the eyes and the skin, or is her soul casting somehow different? I think we know we know already that it's different from how the artists do it, but is it different in a way that she's not going to suffer those effects for lack of a better term there? I don't know if maybe they get superpowers or something else and it's actually a good thing, but is Shalon going to change like these ardent people have changed? That I'm wondering that now.
Here's a red herring theory for you. So these soul casters that practice stone for these overhead awnings have skin like stone, and when Yasna burns the thieves in the alley, she actually just turns to fire and escapes that way. She's not actually dead. There's your theory.
I like it.
So I also like that. But I guess with
Paul's just like, I'm not even gonna think about it.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna spend any more time on it. But I was thinking about this though, like if Shalon keeps soul casting or things like that, would she kind of become like that? And I'm gonna say that this is linked to the Spren. I'm gonna say that this is these soul casters. Maybe there is something that they can do kind of on their own. I don't know. Somehow with these engineered fabrials or something. But I'm gonna say that the Spren is like effectively protecting Shalon from not being like that or making this different. So
Okay.
that it's not however this is that they're doing now. But it's like an entirely different thing from this soul casting, or at least if it's the same thing, she doesn't become like a ghoul person,
Right.
I think there's definitely a difference here. I'm just gonna make the assumption that these soulcaster people don't have a Spren, and they're not like a Knight's Radiance or anything special. So
they probably, I'm thinking, don't have to go to Shadesmar and argue with the air to get it to turn into
rock.
Totally guessing, but
Yeah.
don't think that happened.
It might have.
It very well might have.
And then Navani makes a platform float.
Navani makes a platform float, and this was where I kind of nerded out a little bit in this section, because it kind of flips to, does it actually flip to Navani's perspective, or are we still seeing it through Adolin? I don't remember, but we're definitely kind of seeing things from Navani's worldview, and it totally just switches right into like an engineering mindset, even from the very start. Like it talks about how I think it's Navani's thinking this of the mark of humankind is to create order amongst disorder, to bring the wildness of nature together and create order out of that. That is, the mark of humans. And it's like, that is such an engineering way to think about that. The
Yeah.
artist would completely disagree with that statement, 100% of how, no, that is, they might say that is a terrible thing that humankind, does is take the beautiful chaos of nature and create something with order in it. So just a very engineering or science way to look at the world. And then just the way she kind of steps through this whole test, the way they have like a safety checklist, and they're all worried about, making sure everyone's paying attention and collecting all the data. Like all of those things are stuff that's really important to do when you're going through any kind of a test of a new prototype. So I was getting excited, kind of stuff I get to do.
Platforms being raised, rockets, same thing.
Sure. But yeah, getting to the in-world stuff, the fabrials they're using here, I thought were pretty cool. She calls them what? Conjoined fabrials, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes.
And they're kind of like compared to like the span reeds, right? So you have a reed, which just kind of mirrors this, two different objects, and they perform the same action, miles and miles and miles apart. Here, she's made two platforms that do opposite actions. So they pull one platform down. The fabrials that are in the other platform that are paired with those ones but opposite, now go up, and so it lifts it up, off the ground, counteracting that force of gravity there. So that seems pretty cool. It seems to follow kind of some of the laws of fabrials and whatnot that we've learned so far, but seems like a really interesting application of that science, if you will, of that tech.
Right. There's some fabrials that will mirror each other's movements. There's some that will push against each other. Doesn't matter where they are. There's some that'll keep a room warm somehow.
Yep. My first thought too on this was, if they could perfect this, they could potentially use floating platforms as bridges to get across the chasms. They could use this to make their plateau runs a lot faster, right? You could do a Sadia style bridge run now because you're not waiting on the chulls to bring your bridge up behind you. If you've got this floating platform that someone could just, like push with their hand as they're walking, that can make your job a lot easier out there on the plateaus.
Yeah. Could finally give you bridgeman shields.
Yeah. Or you don't even need bridgemen. The bridge just carries itself.
You have the bridge crew lifting the other bridge, right, running the opposite direction.
You're running away from the
running away from the and then you have to know
That's
when
funny.
to stop. That would be kind of funny.
But yeah, cool stuff. Science and engineering.
Well, we have science and engineering this episode. I think we're gonna have some politics next episode.
Oh boy.
Any closing thoughts on this episode? We had a shorter one. A little Adolin, a little Navani, a little Eshonai.
Yeah, I enjoyed the interludes. I think I liked these about as much as the last ones. I'm really excited to see more of our heralds and hopefully get something more understandable, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool.
Yep, I agree. And I am terrified of an army of Cindy about to come and wreck house on the Alethi. It might be getting messy, folks.
Stormfather, or the Stormform, may not be too forgiving. All right, we can call it there. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot. See you guys next week.
You got it.
Also, Lego.